Hi, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to get into DOGE on a local and state level with Roger and see where we are in that level with that too. Just by the way, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps me out when you do that with that too. So, hey, Roger. So
good afternoon, Scott. How you doing?
All right, man. What you thinking on the state and local level stuff? What's been happening there?
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to do was bring your listeners focus on some of the attention to things that could be happening locally. And I think it's important because we all experience local government and state government a lot more than we do federal government, depending on what we do. And I believe that this is important because there will be steps where we bring the DOGE from the federal level down to the state and local level. Some of these may happen before others do. In other words, it may be local that gets started in the state and then it moves to the state. But that's going to be an area that we're really going to have to take a look at, because if we are truly interested in reducing the cost of government and the amount of our labors and income that go to fund needless activities, it's important to start paying close attention to what those are. And I think the other reason that's important this time of year is because many states are going through developing their budgets for the upcoming year. Many local units of government may have a January to December fiscal year, but a lot of them have a July through June fiscal year. So there's an opportunity to experience some of these things as we go forward and look at this on a federal level, and then maybe shift the focus to a state and local level. And I think it would just be helpful for everyone to understand the fact that they play a larger role in this process than they realize.
Well,
but they got to get started.
We already know that many of the cities out there are bankrupt. They're full on bankrupt, and they're really not getting anything unless it trickles down from the county or from the state. But they're so underneath their capabilities to do it. They really need to declare bankruptcy. And cities are actually a corporation. I learned that long ago here. So it's the corporation that actually has to go down, but it also has this, we have on the local level, it's school boards, it's city councils, that are the mess as just as much. So anyone who utilizes that public funds, that they're always messing with it. Someone's always in the middle of the kitty with that.
Yes. And they're always looking for new ways that they can reach out and bump the funding up a little bit, changing priorities, shifting account items to a different location so that they can raise a new tax that they're authorized by law to raise a tax in one area where they wouldn't be able to if they didn't make the shift. So, I mean, there's all these different gimmicks and so forth that government does to make certain that they get the money they need, regardless of who pays for it and what they have left.
Okay. So, let me show you this and then see what your kind of response is. By the way, I know the Oklahoma DOGE people. They did a meeting in Oklahoma City, and I don't know if I've been to the state capitol because I just hadn't gone to the Oklahoma state capitol, but I think I've been to the Colorado one, and I was pretty fascinated by all the other the state senators, it was their first day there. It was sometime in January, I can't remember. And they were looking over the side and going, whoa, like, what's going on here? And this woman, she is like kicking it up to new levels. So I think there are people like this that are pushing on the areas. Their thing is the wind turbines that are showing up in different areas, and they're messing with people left and right. And I know that the state of Oklahoma is doing all this stuff as we speak. I mean, there's the Tulsa school systems have failed their audit. This is happening all the time.
Yes, and I think you're going to see more frequent local districts do that. One of the problems a lot of places are facing, for example, with school districts, is that they have fewer students in school right on the heels of an expansion or a new bond if they're paid for by property taxes. They're finding out that the more they spend on schools and teachers and education, the less educated their students are and the poorer the test scores are. I mean, there's all these direct correlations there that should wake people up. But then when you do things that hit home, like you talk about a police and fire millage, or you talk about a school millage, or things that are really going to hit people, that's when they turn out to vote for it. And I would put public transit in that category as well, because
Oh, sure.
depending on what happens at the federal level, I would almost imagine that you're going to see a sudden push to increase millages locally to fund for public transit, to fund for education and a variety of other sources, because they can't afford to lose the money to be able to accomplish what they want. And so again, they're going to make the taxpayer pay more, even though we're talking about having them pay less at the federal level.
Well, and I mean, I have a funny feeling though that that's not going to happen because they're not going to get away from it. I mean, get away with it. I know that in Oklahoma they're talking about ripping away property tax. They're talking about a million little things. When we strip this down on many levels, we're going to find, wait, there's plenty of money to be able to build that road or whatever that might be.
Yes, and don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying here about the push to get these passed, in previously when the push was there, people responded because it was something they cared about. Now they have seen the fraud, waste, and abuse at the federal level, and they suspect it's going on at the state and local level. So now they're going to be more inclined to do their homework and to ask questions and say, wait a minute, I worked hard for this and you want to take more? And the answer is no. And that's the biggest thing. They have to show up and they have to vote no. Because if you look at most local elections, we're talking 5, 6, maybe 9% of the population that shows up and votes for a
Right.
million. So we have to make certain that you match that and get another 9 to 10 or 20% that shows up and votes no.
Well, see, and that's the powerful thing. I mean, in most local, smaller, I'm talking about the smaller areas that are happening in every state. It doesn't matter what state you're talking about. It's like 1,500 to 1,000. The two candidates are winning by. So you're talking 500 votes, and yet in the state of Oklahoma, I think the state senate, it runs at, if I remember right, it's like a $45,000 a year job, and yet we're seeing like direct mail pieces. If you just think about the direct mail pieces, blows my mind. Someone's spending, 25, $35,000, and way more than that, just on the surfacey level. And you go, wait a second, how can they do that for a job that's only worth 45,000? The answer is that's there's an avenue of power that someone is trying to coattail along with that.
Yes, and actually what they're doing is they are relying on outside funding. And many times, if you look in the outside funding, that outside funding can come as far away as Washington, D.C.,
Right.
or it can come, it's not supposed to come outside the country, but there's ways for them to launder that through so that you have people in surrounding areas that end up doing the fundraising, gathering the resources, and then investing in the direct mail that goes out because of these efforts. One of the other things that takes place is that people that may have a vested interest there, whether they be, a business or a nonprofit or other governments, they will find ways to get benefactors in their community, and I call them benefactors because they're the ones giving the money, that they will give the money to the cause. And so you can raise that money for the cause, and you can help people get to the point of where they feel like they're being inundated by direct mail pieces, so they might as well vote yes. Most people throw those away, but a lot of people will look to see which side is promoting this and read the direct mail pieces. And so for the handful of ones that do, that may, give them the edge in the vote, that's very important. And so that's why I think people need to start honing their attention on whatever level they feel comfortable with, whether it's a state or local level, but they've got to start focusing on this to the point of where they ask questions, they hold people accountable, and then they rally their neighbors and friends to get out and vote. Because that's the important thing, because eventually you run out of money to pay for these things.
Well, I know the Oklahoma DOGE people actually have programs out there that you can do, and every state's gonna be a little different, but just search for them a little bit, and you will find they'll want you to come in and I think it's Freedom Brigades .com, Freedom Brigades. And what they do is they'll kind of help plug you into different areas, and all you have to do is show up to these meetings, and as soon as you start showing up to the meetings, you're taking notes. They don't know what you're doing there. You're obviously doing something more specific, and you'll stop them from actually voting in some silliness. that they always want to do on any of these local level meetings with that.
Yes, that is true. And one of the other things I would encourage everyone to do is, regardless of what state you're in, local unit of government, whatever area you might live in, look up the title of the name of your city. So, for example, if you're in Tulsa, you look up City of Tulsa. It will take you to their website, and you look under government, and it will identify the city council.
Right.
And once you pop on the city council page, it will take you to a listing of all their agenda items and all their meeting times. And you can, because they all publish these ahead of time, and so you can drop down and get the agenda items, and you can look through them. You can read the budget ahead of time before it's proposed by the city. You can see what they're spending their money on. You can see once if they're going to be raising taxes or fees. And so that's a way that you help educate yourself before you go to the meeting. Then you get your friends and neighbors and go to the meeting, and every meeting, whether it's it's a local meeting, say city, county, township, whatever the structure is, village, they usually have an opportunity for people to speak to agenda items at the beginning of the meeting, and then after the meeting's over with, they can talk about any items.
Right.
And that's a good way for you to get together with different people and try and formulate a committee, if you will, of interested party to go forward and raise your concerns here. If we're looking at the state level, you have the same thing. If you go to, the states, for example, Oklahoma, if you look up a state of Oklahoma, look at the legislative branch, you've got the House and the Senate, and there's drop-down menus there where you can identify the different committees there, your elected official, a way to contact them. You can find out when the meetings are being held, when the hearings are held. If they have, for example, the chamber is meeting to discuss something, or if it's going on within a committee. And those are ways that you can pull your information together. And if you want to narrow your focus to a particular area of interest, say the DOGE committee, or education, or law enforcement, or business and commerce, or military, or whatever it might be, you have an opportunity to focus on those items and then talk with the members of the committee, because that's dropped down and they've got contact information. So that's a way that you could really become more involved in this. But again, you're kind of setting the framework and the stages for moving forward to be actively involved in forcing your government to be more responsive to the needs of its citizens.
Yeah, it makes them pee their pants.
Yes.
It's real easy to do. I mean, this one is in the tri-state area, which is Pennsylvania. Would you say Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. And like, could DOGE be coming? They're writing about it. They're talking about it left and right here. And the answer is absolutely going to happen. And it happens on a local level in every way. Here's North Dakota. Moves to create a state level version of DOGE. You think that's not going to, play a role in that stuff? So when you see different, and I'm seeing the legislation even in the Oklahoma area going, holy cow, that sounds very DOGE in essence.
Yes.
With that too.
And just to add a couple of other elements with that too, if you look at an area like the tri-state area, okay, it's Democrat, but what you're going to see is that these states are going to be forced to have a DOGE committee. They may not realize it, but they will be forced into it, because if we start peeling away education money, if we start peeling away Medicaid, or starting establishing Medicaid rules that people have to follow, because the president said he did not want cuts to Medicaid, but what he didn't say is he didn't want the rules change to be able to qualify for Medicaid.
Right.
Some states, for example, under Medicaid have work requirements. You have to work X number of hours per week in order to qualify for your Medicaid. Others are more liberal and say, now we've done away with the work rules. Now, that's not talking about taking away your health care provision. That's talking about taking away the cash payments that they give you if you choose not to work. And, another example would be if we sit here and take a look at some of the cuts that come to military. The cuts that come to the military, for example, are going to be focusing on the types of commodities, supplies, and so forth that the military will buy from areas around the country.
Right.
And so, for example, they're going to require new procurement rules. And procurement rules are the rules that govern how you sell what you have to government and how government buys it from you. So again, those are going to force changes at the local level, because a lot of the states get funded by funding from the federal government. So you have to follow the federal government rules because they have what they refer to as pass-through, and that is grant money that comes from Washington to the states to help fund a good portion of the programs. And so the states are required to follow the same procurement rules and regulations that the federal government does. And so this will actually force many of the states to set up a DOGE type committee because they're not going to have enough money to pay for the staff and be able to procure the services or goods that they need for the work that has to be done.
Well, I mean, I was hearing this one here, something that I some family members involved in some of these areas, but um, the F-35 strike, what is it called? Strike fighter program. I mean, it's a $1.7 trillion airplane that's been fraught with delays, incapability of things. And you go, you know, what happens on that's a federal level thing. But some of these places like Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, you know, I mean, or Lockheed, you know, what happens is they're on the local level. So if you're in Seattle, you're in Denver, you're in different areas, you can actually be in the local level and saying, what are we doing? Why are they doing that kind of stuff?
Yes, and excuse me for interrupting, but actually
No,
how that goes, I mean, for example, if you have a plant and the plant within an area is building, say, specific nuts and bolts for a machine or a specific piece for a machine or a part of the plane. One of the problems they run into is that if their design, say, or their proficiency in the design or their calibration, whatever types of measuring device they have is off, and they quote a price for, let's say, $1 per item, and it takes them 5 times to get it right, that item just inflated to $5.
right.
And then you add on top of that, you've got the time it took for somebody to go back through, recalibrate, redevelop that piece of material, whatever it may be. Then you have the taxes they pay for the state they're in, the cost of the facility locally, if there's property tax, the overhead that goes into it. They all develop what they refer to as a burden cost, which is the cost of the labor to perform that process. So they add all these together, and before you know it, the cost of that becomes so large. And the way their contract is written is that it's a cost plus. They bid on it, and then it's plus whatever other costs come into play to make certain they get the manufactured product or service to the point of where they need to be. And what we find out is that there's a huge amount of waste. There's a huge amount of over expenditure, and they figure the government's always good for it. And
Right.
so, like President Trump said with the Air Force Ones, you've got to come in and negotiate hard with them and get them to drop the price. And our government has never done that. And many times dropping the price doesn't mean you're putting people out of work. It just means you're forcing people to do the job correctly the first time.
And within a time frame, and you know, but there is a way. You know, I can't actually explain that because it's got some little background with it. But basically, there is a way to test this and make sure that projects come in a very efficient manner and be done correctly the first time. And frankly, you know, I mean, as I'm an audiologist, you know, I have to order parts from the manufacturer for the patient. The average that we might send something back at most, at biggest time frames, has been 20%. And you go, well, that's a lot. Well, and that's at a worst time frame. Normally, it's around 12%. Now, and you go, wow, and that's a custom built, you know, kind of thing for each patient. So if we're at 12%, we're 88% of the time we get it right the first time with that. It's because you always want to cut down the waste and time frame that it costs you, because it costs you money every single time you do that. But see, when it becomes, you know, these local levels, we'll go back to the local level in a second, but you know, the federal level comes down, and see, most of these people are losing their mind because the Department of Education went off, and it's offline now, and so now the local, you know, city board, I mean, the school boards are looking at things and going, I don't want to cut the DEI stuff. Well, guess what? You don't have any choice anymore. I mean, the pendulum has swung, but see, they've never felt the pendulum swung against them. They've
No,
never.
they haven't. And again, talking about education, I mean, if we sit here and take a look at the fact that we have moved away from individualized textbooks, so we have a statewide selected reading curriculum. We have moved away from individualized teaching. I think that there was, for a number of years, when folks went to school, they had an option to learn trades as part of their education, or some other skill that they could rely on if they got out of school and chose not to go to college. We've done away with all those. We've created, in a lot of communities, separate skill centers. Now they're coming out with robotic centers that are kind of separate from the school, but the schools that are finding out that they work the best are beginning to incorporate them back into the K-12 time period. So, it's a matter of having to relearn and reteach how we deal with subject matters in education. And for most school board members, they're too accustomed to doing it the way that they thought it should be done, which is
Right.
not the correct way. Since about the early 1970s, people that are on school boards have fallen away from wanting to be innovative and making certain that students learn to just social promotion and getting them through. And the difficulty you run into is that along the way, when you do that, you limit the types of education they get. You eliminate competition in the classroom. You eliminate competition in the school books and materials.
Mhm.
You move people away from the kind of teaching they need to. You create an environment whereby you turn out sterile students that can't think any way other than the way they've been told to. And then they repeat the process for their kids where they're in school, and we build generation on generation of that. And that really hurts us. And so that's why today we have a situation where when the education department is gone and we tell local school boards, now you've got to do this, and they say, well, we really don't want to. Well, they really don't have a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
Because the next step's going to be is they come into the state and they say, okay, look, state, this is the edict we put forward. You need to knock this stuff off. And if they don't, then the state money goes away. So then the states are in a situation where they have no choice, but they are now unable to give locals the money. So eventually when this comes around, the locals run out of money.
Well, I know that on a personal level, I remember, years ago, well, this was back in the 80s when I was trying to be a English teacher and student taught and got screwed out of my circumstance. But I remember complaining back to with outside of that particular thing. I remember one specific area. I'm secondary English teacher, so I really need content left and right. I mean, I needed content on everything. I needed content for, that I had built content in school to take it and utilize it with the kids. And I didn't need philosophy, but even in the early 80s, oh God, I can't remember the number, but something like 60-70% of it was philosophy. And very little was the content level. And even less was how do you teach the content. And so I think what happens, and then the school boards are the reflection of that. And so, we always want to, not marginalize this kid. And I'm going, okay, listen, if you have a problem, and we're not talking about, there's a educational point about leave no kid behind. Yeah, but you can't like you can't be on a battlefield and for instance on a battlefield, the one guy goes down and the whole platoon stands around, starts crying for that one guy going down. And you go, well, yeah, that's too major of it. That's too wild of an answer. It's actually very germane to that. We say, leave no kid behind, but guess what? Sometimes you have to pull that kid out, and they're so loath to do that.
Yes.
And put them in special education kind of courses to get them back up to capabilities, and then reintegrate them in the main classroom. But see, they don't do that anymore.
Well, and one of the other problems is they have moved away from the types of education whereby you teach young people and you get them involved in smaller groups. It's kind of like what a lot of churches do with small groups, but this is on an educational level where you have reading buddies, you have math buddies, you have people that you work together. So you're really trying to raise the entire class level of education and learning. And again, we've gotten away from that. We also find a situation where, as the schools try and take over more control of the students, they tend to equalize the students coming from the same background when in fact they don't. And so there's a lot of students that might come from a more challenging background than others, and they're kind of lumped in with everybody else. And so that essentially pulls all the rest of them down. And I believe there's an opportunity early on for changing our process, having, for example, small groups, study buddies, things like that, that you can do at an early level to develop those relationships to encourage learning and opportunities for children. And the other part of it is that the best way for young people to see the value of education is to interact with people who've gone through school and who've become successful. It's the best thing you can do, because that way it gives them an opportunity to follow a mentor, follow someone who can provide them guidance in an area they want to work in, achieve education in, do whatever it may be. And we've moved away from all of that. And again, we've lost the local control because we have state government saying, this is how you're going to handle education. This is how you handle Medicaid. This is how you handle transportation. This is how you handle natural resources, right on down the list. And so we have a small group of people in our state capitals dictating how all of us are going to respond to a variety of different things. And people have sort of lost the will to take up the baton and challenge somebody and say, no, I can do it faster and better than you can. Here's a way, here's a suggestion. The people that run for office to be on school boards, it takes a certain kind of person, and they always come back to the same old fallback. You can't be on the school board unless you have kids in the system. You can't be on the school board unless you have a connection to the way the kids are being taught. And yet you put those people on the school board, and what do? They continue the dumbing down process.
Right.
And so people need to back up and go with the people that are going to work to improve the system that you're looking at, rather than trying to dumb it down even further. And that's why I think the value of DOGE at the state and local level is that you cause people to look into the books, look at the budget, look at the policies, look at the programs, look at the payments, look at everything they're involved in doing. And you might very well find that you can run against a school board member and defeat them because you're more connected with the community. Because very few people turn up for elections. And if you gather community support, all of a sudden you're on the school board. And I will tell you, the more you do for parents and neighbors to help their kids get through the system, the more respected you are, and the better you're recognized as being the right person to be there. And when I say respected, I'm talking about being respected for what you know and what you're trying to do to help their kids become educated. Most of the parents are working full time, or if they're fortunate enough to be able to stay home and raise their kids, they still have their hands full of a lot of different things. So having someone who's committed to the education of children is very important. And you take that on to any other area, whether it be law enforcement, natural resources, transportation, whatever within the state, healthcare, and you can start to turn those programs around and begin to make a difference. And see, this is the reason why I feel that by what's happening at the federal government, by you pulling back the money and saying, we're going to open the drapes, if you will, we're going to find out that there is another room there that has curtains in the back of it that covers the door. So we have to pull those back and open the door. And we have to keep penetrating into the system until we get to the point of where we create a good enough understanding of what's going on so people can step back in and take charge, much like they did in the founding days of this country. Everybody was actively involved.
Absolutely. That's why I put freedombrigades.com out there. Guys, go to that website and you can sign up for it, and you can actually go on your local levels, which might mean, and I keep saying to people like, well, holy cow, maybe you should be a state senator. Maybe you should be, a city council. Maybe you should be a school board. But even still, Freedom Brigades, very interestingly, they actually help you, give you the tools that all you have to do is show up and just start taking notes and maybe ask a question here and there. It's like 4 hours a month is a very tiny percentage of time that a lot of people could do. And, they could, and that is one way you start destroying what they do on the local level with that.
That's certainly true. And I guess two other items that I would encourage everyone to take a look at. If you're looking at the state level, Go to your state legislature page and look under the laws or statutes. The important thing to do is find a copy of your state constitution. That state constitution will walk you through and show you what our forefathers have identified within a state as being most important, and where the funds go. You can learn the responsibilities of the branches of government and the types of things that the states will fund. The same thing is true at the local level. You're going to have a charter, and that city charter or county charter is going to identify what you do and identify what the responsibilities are, and kind of lays things out very nicely. At the county level, you generally will have it may be set up where you have a board of commissioners that runs the meetings and so forth. But again, they are relying on state statutes and maybe local practices. They're not so much into passing regulations unless they happen to be a metropolitan area where the county and the city have merged together into one unit. If you look at a city council or a village, they're going to have ordinances that they pass that are going to dictate what you can do and what you can't do. Take a look at those. I mean, some of those are really interesting reads. And one of the sources I like to go to is called MuniCode. It's MUNICODE.com. And what they have is they have a map of the United States, and you go in there and you pick your state, and then it will list all the different locales. And you pull that up, and then you pick your city, and it will bring up the municipal code of the city. And that's a good way to find.
By the way, is that at municode.com?
MuniCode, yes.
Okay. No, go ahead. I was just
Oh,
showing.
yes. When people ask me questions, from another state or so forth, what does this say or what does that say? That's the place I go to, because most of these you can search by keywords. So if you're looking, for example, for police, you type in police and it'll bring in all the ordinances that identify with police. Or you're looking for vehicles, it'll bring all those up too. So that's kind of a nice thing to have access to. So having that for the local units or your local unit of government, and then of course your state legislative branch, looking up their documents, that's very important to have too. So that kind of gets you to where some of those sources of information are. The other thing is that whether it's a local unit of government or state government, there's going to be a place there where you can identify the meetings that take place. All of their meetings are open. All of their meetings will give you an opportunity to testify if you choose to testify, or if you just want to go and take notes. Get to know who people are. And if you've got a local legislator or senator or assemblyman, that they call them in some states, assemblyman or woman, find out who they are and talk to them. Get to know who they are. Get on their mailing list of information. And that's a good way to gather the information you need to become informed about what you would like to participate in. The same is true with the school board. Many schools will put out a newsletter. They'll have a school website where they do current events and information about what's happening in the school district. Make yourself very familiar with those, because that will help you become educated in the process. Because it's easier to go through and talk to people when you're knowledgeable about what you're talking about.
Right.
And when they find out someone comes in who's knowledgeable and done their homework, all of a sudden you have their attention. And you have their attention because they realize that, number one, they can't gloss over you. Number two, they have to deal with your questions because they are very, very well thought out questions. And number three, they have to be careful how they answer them, because they don't want to give different answers to different people.
Well, and lastly, the devil likes to hide in the shadows. I believe that, we as believers, Roger and I specifically, and maybe hopefully you are too, when you're listening to this, but when you walk in the light, I mean, I think it's in John 1, let's see, verse 3 or 4, it says the light entered the world and the darkness didn't understand it. It's a really, really fascinating point. I remember years ago, I had a vision of that. I remember I was in high school on a school bus, and I was thinking about, the table that you would see, the small tables that you would see when you go to classrooms. And then when the light would come down, obviously there's shadows underneath it, right? I had this vision of there were no shadows anywhere. And I had no idea. I'm like, 16 years old, and I'm riding the bus. And I remember, I was reading the New Testament and Psalms and Proverbs, a little little booklet I would read all the way through on the bus because it was an hour and a half ride one way. And and I remember going through that and I saw that vision and I never forgot it. And I believe that you guys can present that kind of thing in those places. The people at the freedombrigades.com said the same thing. She goes, my gosh, you just show up, and after a little bit, you don't even have to be unbelievably super knowledgeable about them. But if you're going to come back and they know that you're coming back, they just simply don't get away with their crud with that.
That's true. And I think one of the other things to emphasize, you look around and you see people and they say, well, leaders are born, leaders are also made too. And I've been in a lot of situations where people came forward and they were shy. They just didn't think that they had the ability to be elected to office. And in the past, I've recruited people to run for office, and I've had conversations with them and worked them through the process. And they've gone on and they've become successfully elected officials, and they've stayed true to their form. And so you really have to look at what you can do for your community, for your state, and for our country, because we're moving into a point here where people are going to be called upon to serve in a variety of different areas. And if you have a passion for doing this, or if you develop a passion for it, you can very easily grow into a leadership position where your friends and neighbors and others in your community look to you for leadership and guidance. And that's the opportunity you have to begin to shape the laws and shape the policy that we're going to experience in our country going forward. Because I will tell you, if you look at what is on the books today with regard to laws and regulations at the federal, state, and local level, I mean, it's astounding that our country has allowed this behavior to continue. We're approaching 250 years, and we've got some of the lamest, poorest laws on the books that we really don't need to have. And how is that translated? Well, that's played with the courts, it's played with the legislature, it's played with the executive, be it presidents, governors, or mayors, or county administrators. So we've got all these different types of things that are taking place that we as a population, we as citizens of the United States have to pull back and recreate if we want to have a republic going forward. And if we want to be able to have our republic that we can pass forward to the next generation and generations beyond. We've got a lot of work to do. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but it's important to inspire people to want to get involved and want to participate. The easy thing to do is stay at home, but some people start by watching a council meeting or a state legislative meeting on their TV at home, and they see something that gets them really upset. They go look it up and they say, you know what, I got to go down there and talk to somebody face to face. Or if you find out that your elected officials are having coffee with the council, coffee with a representative, go get a cup of coffee and talk to them. Deal with them face to face, but just go prepared with the knowledge and the questions you need to ask, but then listen to how everybody else responds. Because I think you'll find that you're missing out on a process that you should have participated in a long time ago, and now's the right time to move forward and do that.
Right. So again, I think the basic idea here is DOGE is coming, and as DOGE is coming throughout the whole system, and there's no stopping it. And we've talked about this before. The 17th letter says nothing can stop what's coming, and the reality, it's come, and so it does require you not just to sit back and just wait for it to happen to you, but you jump forward and move forward and step up to that, because it's happening all around you with that too.
That's true. And we have to move from a passive state to an active state. And, just as an example, here recently within the last day, Elon has talked about creating a DOGE dividend next year. And what they've done is they figured that they could save a certain amount of money from the federal government so that they can issue a $5,000 DOGE dividend check to every American citizen based on the savings they've had within the government. So if you think about that as being a DOGE dividend that they have, and we look at the potential that our tax structure is going to change or may even be eliminated, that's where action protects your wealth. That's where action protects the things that we pay for, and it protects future generations. And what people don't realize is that if you go become a member of a school board, you're going to be one of, say, 6 or 7 people on that school board that are going to have a chance to vote. You're going to shape policy. You're going to identify how money gets spent. The same thing is true if you go to a city council. The same thing is true if you go to a county commission. If you go to a state legislature, you're going to be one of a limited number of people that are going to be able to cast a vote to shape policy and budgetary items and programs for the future. And that becomes a powerful position because you can lead from your heart and you can lead from your conscience, but you can do what's right for the people that you represent when you come into office. And that's important because once you get there, then you are able to withstand the temptations to be bought off by somebody else.
Right.
And that's important. Depending on the types of preparation you do for office is going to dictate and drive how successful you are, but also who your true body of supporters are. Are they going to be the citizens? Are they going to be the members back home? Or are they going to be some interest group over here that agrees to give you money? The minute you sell out to an interest group, you've lost your cause.
It's over.
You've lost your purpose. And so that's why it's important to start at the local level, because it's much harder to go back to your neighbors and say, you sold out.
Yeah.
It's easier to go back and say, this is what I got for you. And again, when you look at the discussions going on in the Congress right now, and they're talking about the budget, the Senate had their budget proposal put together, and the president says, not a bad start, but I really like this big budget bill over here in the House because they are giving me all I want. And the Senate says, well, we're giving you most of what you want, but we're going to raise expenses a bit and we're going to do some favors for other people. And he said, that's not what I want. I don't want you to do favors for these other people. I want you to do it the way we're talking about it and doing it for the citizens that we represent back home. And see, that carries the weight. And that's why if you're an effective elected official, you never forget who sent you there and what your purpose is.
Right. Well, guys, that's what I would recommend is spend some time looking this kind of stuff up. Go to freedombrigades.com, make a difference. And I think that you can and be encouraged that it's already happening. So
I agree.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.